2 weeks ago, I defended my thesis and my second paper got accepted. That was a busy time. From the feedback I got, I assumed that I performed quite well at writing. I do not mean that I should go for the Literature Nobel Prize, but I get quite some text output in a given time frame. In this video, I want to share my experience with my doctoral researcher colleagues. But let's start at the beginning. Last autumn, suddenly my second supervisor sent me to my office with the words, "Now, you go to your office and start writing your thesis right away." As you can imagine, I procrastinated another week before I started really thinking about how to tackle writing a book, a thesis, given the boundary conditions of 6 months, parallel research activities, and writing other research papers. As I am a researcher, the first thing I researched was how to write a PhD thesis. Unfortunately, I mainly found either how to structure a thesis or how to improve my scientific English. Thus, I was kind of demotivated because there was a huge task in front of me and at the same time quite abstract information like how to structure it or too detailed information how to improve it, what I've written. But how to get from the structure to the actual text? In this video, I want to show you how I found a way from structure to text and could finally improve my English with stylistic devices. I guess there are many ways to get to Rome, but I want to present you my way. I did not invent it from scratch, but it was mainly based on the project management Scrum method I was applying on a daily basis. About that, there are other videos explaining it. Before we get into the structured writing method, I need a cool name. There are two very helpful things I learned while writing. I call them the 2 golden rules of writing a thesis. First, good writing is bad writing rewritten, actually a citation from Mark H. Rybert. And second, your or my target group is incredibly small. The first point, good writing is bad writing rewritten, refers to iterations, and it's quite motivating because it takes all the pressure out of you and me. The first draft can be okay, but it can also be terrible, and both is fine. Once you have something, you can work on it. The second point touches the communication and storytelling part. My research about how to write a novel showed that going to be authors have trouble defining the target group. For whom I am writing this? What is the person's background? What would he or she like to read? This task is incredibly easy for us. There are a handful of readers, the doctor father and the second supervisor. Maybe you can imagine a third one, or you give your thesis to some colleagues and you have more readers. But basically it is easy to imagine who will read it. Now the structured writing method. You have to put yourself in a bossy mode. This is now decision time. Planning my first 2 sections took me 2 hours. So what you will need is, let's say first, you have 80% or at least 80% of your results, the ones you want to write down in your thesis. You know how to structure your thesis. You need pen and paper or a text editing program and decision-making energy. At this stage, you are the boss. So you have to plan the tasks you will be distributing to your co-workers, which are also you. Okay, then, you have all of this. Then let's decompose writing a text. What I mean here is the task of writing any text can be split into subtasks you can work on subsequently. Each task has its difficulty and a certain amount of time depending on you, and it needs a certain amount of time depending on you. First, learn what is the purpose of this text and find out how you should structure/write it. Get as much information as you can until you get satisfied and the text starts forming in your mind. Now is the time to structure the text. This can start with a mind map inspired by the research you did, and it should end up with some messy bullet points. Then write the first draft. Keep in mind golden rule 1. After writing it, wait at least 1 day, then read it and correct it. Keep now golden rule 2 in mind. Point 4 and 5 can be done several times. You will get blind for errors once you think it's good enough. Give it to your supervisor. He will think differently. apply his corrections, and maybe iterate it again. That's it. At least this is how I finished writing my thesis, and at least my supervisors were quite happy with it. For me, life is easier with examples, so next I will show you what I did. For each section, I created a table including the subtasks, estimated degree of difficulty, and how I actually felt it, to know how bad I am at estimating this. The estimated time it will take me to do this, and I documented the real time I used also for checking it. Basically, you just need the subtasks, but the time and difficulty information helps you to plan when you will do it. If it is a short time but intense task, you should do it when you're super focused. If it is an easy task but it requires a long time, you should also allocate it accordingly. But that is high level super efficient, so you can just go for the subtasks. This structure assumes you already know what you want to write. If you do not know, you can even fit in literature research. I had to do that too because my supervisor had a new idea and wanted me to include it. Then you start with literature research and continue with point A to G. Maybe you have already written some parts, also then you can just fit in the remaining tasks into this. So when I started writing, I had no plan, so I started without any plan. My first plans looked more messy like this. So I already had written some introduction and my supervisor Martin had already read it, so I started with applying his corrections, but also revising it, according to what I got from a long discussion with him. Then I also scheduled the further corrections. First I corrected the obvious stuff, and then I corrected according to stylistic devices. A second example is the discussion part. Before making this list, I discussed with my supervisor and he told to put my sensitivity simulations into the discussion. So I made this. In 0 I read about how to write the discussions. Here you see my discussion mind map I wrote afterwards. Then in A I included my sensitivity tests into the discussion part, describing and explaining them. In B I made sure that there is no discussion in the results part. In C I planned a new section, and in D I did corrections, but obviously I forgot to document this. The only section which was not chaotic was the conclusion section. From a time tracking, which is quite unreliable because after a while I did not document this meticulously, I can now say that the actual writing of my thesis took a minimum 184 hours of actual writing. Excluded is plotting, analyzing data, discussing with colleagues, and other research activities. Only the writing part, 184 hours, minimum. So with that, I hope I could give you an inspiration of how to plan your writing. After you planned it, you actually have to work on it. It is not like a slave, but like a doctoral researcher who reports errors in the planning to his boss, which in this case is you do, and improving the plan. This is not the only way to write a thesis. It would be great if you share how you succeeded writing it as well, so we can help others to make the future doctoral researchers succeed. And now, go to your office and start writing immediately.